You're looking at the red picture with horses. It was sold for a staggering 2.8 million euros in 2006 after it was lost for more than 60 years and reappeared out of nowhere. But something is odd about it. Look closely. Can you spot what's wrong with this painting? Don't worry if you don't know what I'm talking about, because even by art experts, this Campendonk was considered as one of the best paintings the artist has ever created. If it weren't for the little problem that the picture was not painted by Campendonk, but by the greatest art forger of the 21st century, Wolfgang Beltracchi. Over a time span of more than 30 years, Beltracchi, together with his wife and other accomplices, led the art world by the nose. With an ingenious trick which tracked back to the Nazi rule over Germany, brilliant artistic talent, and an extra dose of audacity, Beltracchi's forgeries made millions. Even though for some, Beltracchi is an unscrupulous imposter and self-promoter, for others he is a Robin Hood kind of character that held up a mirror to the art world. But how did Beltracchi manage to deceive the whole world for decades? And why of all things did the red picture with horses, which was probably one of the best works Beltracchi had ever painted, lead to the exposure of the million-dollar fraudster? Beltracchi started his career path as an art forger from a young age. He was born in 1951 in Germany as Wolfgang Fischer, and with only 14 years old, he had already copied his first Picasso. After being kicked out of school at the age of 17, and after leaving art school after only 4 years without a degree, he embarked on a hippie wandering through Europe and North Africa, in his own words, living a life full of sex, drugs and rock and roll. He lived an exciting and easy life, but since he needed money but didn't like the idea of hard work, a plan had to be made. Therefore, in the 70s, Beltracchi began to use his talent to copy the paintings of great artists and to sell them on flea markets to finance his way of life. Already back then, he was proud to earn more than his father, unaware that his career as a counterfeiter had only just begun. His activities as a forger should really pick up speed with a chance encounter after he had continued to perfect his craft of forgery during the early 80s. He immersed himself into the lives of the artists he copied, studied their habits, which music they were listening to, what they ate, and what literature they were reading to be able to perfectly imitate the art styles of many great artists. Beltracchi didn't just copy the paintings of others, because that way he would have been exposed quickly. Instead, he looked through the catalogs of past collections and used his talent to recreate lost paintings, of which ideally there were no photographs, but only size and name handed down. Then, in early 1985, Beltracchi met Otto Schulte-Kellinghaus in a coffee shop, not knowing that this encounter would change the lives of the two men forever. Otto Kellinghaus, who is said to have appeared confident, eloquent, but also tougher than Wolfgang Beltracchi, was the crucial piece of the puzzle which the painter was still missing to go for the big wins, the necessary context in the art world. With the help of Schulte-Kellinghaus, who from now on was responsible for the distribution of the counterfeit art, and who managed to convince art experts of the authenticity of Beltracchi's forgeries with made-up stories, it was now possible for Beltracchi to sell his works directly to auction houses for sometimes several 10,000 euros. To perfect his forgeries, Beltracchi made nearly all of the paints himself in order to ensure that they didn't contain any modern components. Additionally, he used old paintings as canvas in order for the fabric to look authentic. Furthermore, Beltracchi limited his counterfeit activities on rather unknown artists, in the interests of avoiding any unnecessary attention. During the following years, Beltracchi and Schulte-Kellinghaus made good business, and depending on his need for money, Beltracchi painted either a few pictures a year or up to 10 in only 1 month. However, the forgeries didn't sell for record sums, at least not yet, because this was supposed to change rather quickly. In 1992, the deceiver, who was back then still named Wolfgang Fischer, got to know the charming Helene Beltracchi, and only 1 year later took her last name after they have married. However, Helen did not only marry the swindler, but she actively got involved in her husband's criminal business, and together they came up with an ingenious plan on how they could generate even more money with Beltracchi's forgeries. The plan revolved around the Jewish art collector Alfred Flechtheimer, who in 1933, after the Nazis' takeover of power, had to flee from Germany. Coincidentally, Helen's grandfather, Werner Jäger, lived right next to Flechtheimer's art gallery at that time, and so the couple quickly came up with the story that Flechtheimer gave not a small part of his collection to Werner Jäger before fleeing Germany. The story went on that Helen's grandfather hid the paintings as they were considered degenerate art under the rule of Hitler, and supposedly only years later the collection was rediscovered by Jäger's grandchildren, who now want to gradually sell the paintings. Of course, the couple needed evidence to support their story. Therefore, Beltracchi designed a label that he attached to the paintings to prove that their origin is really in Flechtheimer's collection. Believe it or not, the fake label was enough to convince art experts and dealers of the authenticity of the reappeared paintings. And one time, where there did arouse suspicion about the authenticity of one of Beltracchi's paintings, the couple just went on to fake a photo on which Helene posed as a grandmother with alleged paintings from the collection hanging on the wall in the background. The Beltracchis and their accomplices made good profits, up until they were nearly caught in 1997. However, the Beltracchis managed to flee to southern France, and the investigations by the German authorities were soon to be dropped. And because the art market was still insatiable and everyone wanted their piece of Flechtheimer's collection, Wolfgang Beltracchi continued to paint diligently, and Otto Schulte-Kellinghaus continued to sell his forgeries all over the world. Whether Paris, London or New York, Beltracchi's works were in great demand everywhere. This André Derain was sold for 370,000 euros in 2000, and after Max Ernst was auctioned for 1 million euros in 2002, in 2007 The Woman with the Head by Max Ernst was sold for a staggering 1.5 million euros. All those paintings have one thing in common: they were all the work of Beltracchi. Therefore, with the millions his forgeries were generating, he and his wife lived a life in the lap of luxury. However, along with the success, Beltracchi began to feel untouchable, and at the same time became more and more careless. Thus, of all things, the red picture with horses, an alleged Campendog which was auctioned in 2006 as the most expensive Campendog of all time for 2.8 million euros and was considered as one of Campendog's best works, turned out to be fatal for the counterfeiters gang. Because in 2008, the Campendog was examined in a laboratory after an expert had expressed doubts about the authenticity of the label Beltracchi had faked. The forger's downfall began when it turned out that the paint Beltracchi used contained minimal amounts of titanium white, and as the experts noticed, this white pigment did not even exist back in 1914 when the original picture is presumed to have been painted. As a result, investigations were set in motion, which finally reached the Beltracchis on August 27th in 2010 and consequently led to their arrest. Finally, it was Beltracchi's laziness which brought the counterfeiter down. Specifically, after he ran out of zinc with which he mixed his self-made white paint, he went on to use an industrial white paint, which unknowingly consisted of a small amount of titanium white. In the end, Wolfgang Beltracchi was sentenced to a prison time of 6 years. His wife Helen was sentenced to 4 years in prison, and Otto Schulte-Kellinghaus had to serve 5 years in prison after Beltracchi confessed that the 4 paintings he was accused to have faked are his works. However, according to Beltracchi, he has forged up to 300 paintings over the course of his entire career, and it is estimated that Beltracchi's paintings generated a profit of up to a staggering 50 million euros. Today, Beltracchi is still happily married to his wife Helen and is one of the most expensive artists in Europe. According to his own statements, the majority of his forgeries is still undiscovered, and even today he still sees his pictures in art galleries and museums. Beltracchi shows no trace of remorse. Thus, for some he is an egocentric criminal, and for others a rebel who has held up a mirror to the art world and used the greed of others to make it to the top.